We are
All right, so as soon as Counselor Hoffler sits down. Right. January work session is now in progress. First thing on our discussion is the town hall we had for the public safety building, which has been coined the term we should use because it's not an emergency, it's a public safety.
Public safety.
And since it's so early in the launching of this, and I don't have a dime on it, that's mine with me, public safety. That's according and suggested by Chief Gregory, and we appreciate that. Because it's all encompassing and that's what we want. A couple of things about the town hall, if we're discussing anything with the public. Making suggestions on how we can go about doing something, we need to all be emailed about it. So everyone knows that we're not caught short or off guard with someone saying something like, we could start 2 hours later. You know, stagger the starting times for people, you know, just let everyone know. When you have that kind of conversation, and if you go to Chad can email us and that way we're not having a serial thing. I would appreciate it. And if there's any need to criticize something, we need to do it in a private fashion, not a public forum, because it's just not appropriate to criticize anybody in a public meeting. Now, having said all that, does anyone have anything they want to say about the town hall? I'm looking at you, Dana.
Well, okay, well, I'll be honest with you, it went off better than I thought it would be. I was very nervous going into it that, because we hadn't discussed what we were gonna talk about and the agenda and everything else in an environment like this. And we didn't, not even all of us knew in advance what the questions were gonna be. I was very concerned that the public were gonna ask us questions that we wouldn't have answers to. And at this critical stage, that could make us look like either we were avoiding answering them or we are incompetent, and that is, to me, at this stage in the game, I think we're building trust again. I think that's job number one for us, is building trust and creating communication. And the more that they ask questions and the more we're able to answer the questions, the more confident they're going to become in us. Because you and I hope that we all understand that as we go along, we're gonna get to the point to where this thing is it's gonna start off slow and it's gonna start picking up speed, and we're gonna have to make decisions very quickly. And we are not gonna be able to go out to the public every time we make a decision. So when we're making those decisions, we have to make sure that we are confident that we're making the decisions with what they want in mind, but they're not necessarily we're not gonna be able to take a vote every time we do that. So we need to build confidence. They need to know that we are, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely believe that there was a lot of information put out before that was misleading and made them believe that it was an us versus them, or with the city council versus the public kind of a thing. And I don't believe that that was the case, but perception is everything. If that's what they
Right.
perceive, then that's the reality, and that is the hurdle we have to overcome. So I agree that we need to continue to have town halls, but I think we also need to remember that town halls are one of the common mistakes made in this type of when people are moving forward on these types of projects, is thinking that that's going to be enough, or that one time you get the public's agreement with you on something that that, you know, you become overconfident in that. We need to continue to, all of us, if we believe in this project, we need to have meetings with the stakeholders. Both the people that are gonna ask us the hard questions in this community, and the people that are gonna be in agreement with us. And we need to learn from those and come back, and we need to have more meetings like this where we're able to discuss publicly, these are their concerns, and we need to learn from it, we need to be open to learning from it, and we can't forget that. But I think that as a first meeting, I think it was a successful meeting. I think that it did what you've intended for it to do, and I thank you for pushing us to have that meeting. Because I probably would put it out a little bit longer, and I think it was, again, it was a success in that regard, and I was wrong. I think that people wanted to hear from you. But I have seen on social media where there are still some of the same old questions that were answered in that meeting, and people weren't in attendance and didn't hear it. So we need to continue to communicate, we need to continue to repeat our message. We need to come up with some kind of a communication plan. We need to speak it low, we need to speak it high, we need to let the people come back, and we need to repeat it over and over and over again, so we can continue to move forward on this.
Thank you for the critique. Preston, you got anything to say about the meeting?
Yeah, I think it should be a 7 o'clock meeting. I mean, you know, for the working people that live in this city, I think it did them a disservice.
Okay,
I think it should be for, I mean, if we're gonna have a public meeting, it should be for the public and not just the people that aren't.
okay. Anything else?
That's probably, I thought that the people that did attend there asked some great pertinent questions and wanted, you know, some information about what was going on. So, you know, I mean, there's a lot of animosity in this town, it's because of the last fire one. And I think it's riled everybody up. So I think the more, you know, that we inform the general public, I think the better off we're gonna be. So I agree with what we're doing.
I agree. Rita, do you have something?
No, I don't want to be a stuck,
Us.
a stuck up. But I really liked the way you handled the meeting. I mean, you had a really no nonsense attitude. Yet you were open, where you just didn't agree with everything, but you were kind, and you really did have a no nonsense attitude, and I liked when you said, you know, if you guys don't want a fire station, just let me know, because I'm not gonna be doing this for another 6 years. I liked that. So that's not the comment.
Okay,
I'm sorry I stuck out.
your truth is not something up. Sure.
I thought it was a great first step, and I really appreciated, both of our chiefs and Andy being there and adding in, their thoughts and points of view, as well as Mark. I did get some feedback, and I'll just share with you some considerations that citizens, I don't know, suggested or asked me about. The first one is that the council should have control over the due diligence expenditures. I'm not putting this out there as what I'm saying the way it should be, but these are suggestions from the public. And the due diligence expenditures should be made public as we go. Second suggestion was all correspondence should be available to the public at any point in time and not through a records request. Third one is structural engineering report on the existing building. Maybe we already have it. Do we already have that? No, okay.
We have an open one somewhere, but not one we have on that current.
Okay. Fourth one was the response time, having a response time study done on potential sites. Already talked to Chief Como about that. Astoria did that for their potential sites, and the fire chief up there said it was money well spent. The fifth one is to survey the public on what they think the fire department needs are. I could I could, I would be in total agreement with doing that, but I'd like to give a little bit more information to the public first, so they kind of, you know, have an understanding and can make a decision about what they feel the needs are. Let's see, the budget for the new firehouse, needs to be presented to the public and, not estimates, but when it comes down to it, a true budget for the new firehouse. I'm just throwing this out there.
I'm listening.
I don't know what's possible, what isn't possible. And then the last one was Eric's suggestion about ranked choice voting. I really like that suggestion. So I wrote these down, so Carrie has them, and I just want to put those out there for everybody else to.
Okay, well, I thought it went a lot better than it could have gone. Or it could have gone a lot worse than it did. I don't know how to say that, but when I asked for questions and comments and then just was dead silence, I honestly tell you, I panicked. I didn't know what to do, and then Dana spoke up, and then there was questions, and then there were comments, and I thought that went really well, but I wanted an organic meeting where if they didn't say anything, I would have brought up the fact that if you're not interested in talking about it, then we're not interested in doing it. Because I'm not gonna waste any more time on this. That's honestly how I feel about the situation. Now, we're in a totally different area. They've said they want us to move ahead and they want us to move faster than one meeting a month and doing just one thing a month. So with that, I got to go back over the recording and see exactly what they have asked us to do, so I can formulate what the next meeting is going to be about. But Chad has been able to get not a presentation, what do you call that, Chad?
Information.
An information sheet on what a company would do for us if they were to be the owner representative on a fire station. And you all have a copy of that, which I believe is in the public safety building printout. And it's really worthwhile looking at because there's a lot of information on what they think they can do for it. And this is just an idea, because I suggested we have someone run the show because there's no one here who can do it.
So are you talking about a feasibility study?
Well, it's more than that.
This is
I got it.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
We can go over that a little bit if you like.
Yeah, well, why don't we go, Chad, why don't you go over just a little bit, because I wanna move this along so the crew can go home and get their time with their families.
Yes. So this draft that I put together, page 1 is just some of the questions that we had. To get this meeting kind of going, and I think that we see a justification for the replacement of the fire department building. How the deficiencies impacted our operations and emergency services, those will start coming out. But essentially, what I've been doing is I've been talking to other communities who have been through the same sort of things we have. There are communities such as Manson and Cannon Beach who have been working on replacing their buildings for many, many years. And they have had the same kind of outcome as we have during the last question that we posed to our community. Kind of a little bit of lost control, people, feeling as though there wasn't enough information, costs too high, locations, wrong spot, all of that. And many of those other communities also tried to do it kind of on, not on the cheap, I guess, but inexpensively to be able to push these things through. Now, for reference, from 2016-ish to the end of the campaign, when it went down, the city spent about $170, maybe a little bit more than $170,000 on all of the locations that we discussed. the park location, the High Point location, the location that's over there, Highlands location, the cottages. When talking to some of these folks with such as Manzanita and that, they had finally decided to take a different approach. Architects and building companies are approaching cities saying that we can help you get through these types of situations a little bit more smoothly with all of the communication with communication to our residents being paramount, communication within the city council and the team being paramount, and then just taking these processes through one bite at a time, such as you were asking. Do we need what kind of costs are we gonna get out of this? How are we gonna do a needs assessment, that sort of thing. So Manzanita is a good example right now. They've been struggling with this for years. They hired a company representative or a city representative who has a lot of building experience. Some of these organizations have experience, they have architects in-house, they have soils experts in-house, and they have people that have been through these types of scenarios with other communities. And I would like to take a look at what the costs to have one of these representatives helping us with our project. On page 2 in there, I have a paragraph in there kind of describes what a owner's representative can do and why it might be crucial for cities. But I can tell you that with the amount of information being requested, the amount of plans to be done, it would be really difficult for this team to come together and produce a lot of those things in a way that was that the public would feel good about. So this is like a third person to come in and help us through our plans. The representation group, the items that are listed down below, these are some of the things that they work in. They've got a critical role in managing large projects. They help define the project scope and develops the plan. They act as the bridge between the city and the various stakeholders, including architects, contractors, consultants, and the public. Represents the city's interests through projects to ensure it's completed on time within budget and required quality standards. Assist with procurement and contract management. Assist with budget and financial management. Assist with communication and stakeholder engagement. And assist with projects exclusion and oversight, including regulatory compliance, the permits, change management, closeout, and post-product evaluation. Those are the kind of services that we can get from a group like this, and we can do it in steps. It doesn't have to be an entire enchilada type scenario where this person can come in, help us get started depending on our scope, start taking us through the process, and then we can figure out where else we need to go. But initial costs for something like this to have a project manager could somewhere be around $30,000 for those types of steps. Other costs that will come to the city is going to be architecture work. It's going to be permitting process and working with the state. And then it's also going to be the design process. And all of that combines, just throwing some numbers out, could cost the city about $140,000 for this particular project. That would be spent probably within the next year to year and a half. That's an estimate. That's spending more money than we did last time, but I think that it answers a lot of the questions that the people that you've been talking to have. They want more budgetary information. They want to see more of the communication. They want to be more involved in the process, whether it be through stakeholders or just attending meetings. And these people have been through this. They've seen what's going on lately within the last 5 years in politics, and they could be an assistance to us. So one of the things I would like to do is start going out, putting together a request for proposal to get the ideas of various organizations that might be able to help that and bring that back to the council with a cost and saying, is this something that we want to move forward? And then it could be the council's decision on whether or not to move to do that.
So would this person or entity be responsible in interacting with the public, or would everything go through you first and then the consultant?
They would work with us as a team. There's not gonna be one person in this. I learned a lot of lessons from the last time and took on too much of the work myself trying to get it through. I think that if we do this and we have a nice pace, we can accomplish all the communication, get the community involved. I think that has been by far the number one issue here. And they have experience with that. They've done it with other cities. They were using examples of when you bring people in and you have 4 or 5 tables, see a group that comes in. And this person's kind of dividing that group up into various tables to get good ideas, good conversations. Making sure that we have a calendar set up, as the mayor was saying, with future meetings. People want more often and more information. And we can do that by setting up a calendar, saying, here's the things we're working on this month. Putting it into the calendar, working on them, and then having a town hall to discover what it is that we've been working on, what we've learned, what gaps there are, what more information that we need. And then just take people along with us.
You get their feet.
Yes, obviously, their feedback is important.
Yeah, but it should be stated, absolutely.
So when you talk about Manzanita, did that have to do with their emergency services?
There's city hall and I think their police station that they have that they're working on right now.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm learning.
So I'm not clear about this, so if we hired somebody to do this, or a group of people to do this, are they the ones that are directly communicating with the public or not?
They're assisting the city council. And then the city's council is gonna make the decision on how the communication is going to work. We'll have a plan. But it will be all of us, depending on the speciality, depending on the questions. But they will be there to help us organize this process so that it's coming from you, the city council.
My only concern, I mean, it'd be great to have help, don't get me wrong, I always ask for help. But my only concern is, this goes back to what I just talked about, that is getting the public's opinion every step of the way. So if we're considering having a group like this, we need to either have a couple, 3 groups come and present to the public, and then have a public discussion about whether they think we should spend the money that way. Do you see what I'm saying? I think the public should be engaged in all of this decision making. That's my only point. That's what I'm asking for. I know that makes it longer. I know it makes it harder. I know there's gonna be a lot of opinions, but I think it's really important.
Well, you saying that brings about the fact that we're not gonna, I don't believe we can get 3 groups coming in and making a pitch to the public. I think we can get them to come in and make a pitch to the council and what they can do and how they will do it. And then we can turn around and go to the citizens and pitch it to them. Because all we're gonna be doing is going over the same thing that we're going over right now, basically, whatever it is they propose for us.
Right, but the optics are different. I'm just.
Yeah,
putting
you're right,
it right.
you know, that's, some people would be concerned about the optics. Are we giving them the full disclosure?
I think that, it's easy to misunderstand the role of the person that he is suggesting. Nobody is going to be able to come in, and we're not going to be able to abdicate our role as community leaders to somebody that we pay. That will always be our role. The people that elected us expect us to communicate with them, and so that will always be our role. The person that they are suggesting is the person that is going to come in and fill in the void that none of us can fill in. We all have different experiences that lead us to believe that we have some valuable input to this project. my personal experiences, I've run projects similar to this, but I worked with something similar to this. I was blessed to work in a county with, where we had people like this that guide you along the way. They're your continuity. We have elections coming up this year. We're gonna have elections coming up in another couple of years. And I agree with you that we need to hurry this project along, but I would caution you that if you wanted me to commit that we'd have this project done in 2 years, I would never make that bet. I hope we get it done in 2 years, but we're not gonna get it done. But I would not lay money on us, because I would not want us to get ahead of ourselves or not be able to take the best advantage of whatever economic or political situations come down the road. And somebody like this has the experience that we don't have to guide us along the way. Now, this person doesn't rule over us, this person guides us, this person makes recommendations. And then we take that information and we discuss it with the public as is, and then go back and this person is not going to do anything that we don't tell him to do or her to do, but they're going to make sure that there's continuity in this project, that it continues to move forward, that we don't fall into some of the common mistakes that people, and that we aren't doing this over and over and over again before we finally get a project. So although this is a lot of money, I actually was going to suggest that we consider something like this. Because I think it's in our best interest to have somebody who knows what they're doing guiding us, rather than us flailing around and making very expensive mistakes over and over.
Well,
Okay, can I just say one more thing? Thank you, Dana, and I agree, like I said, I would love to have somebody help us through this process, absolutely love that. Cause it's really a complex situation. What I don't agree in is us as a council making a decision about spending this kind of money without asking the public's opinion about spending this kind of money. That's all the feedback that I've been getting from people, and I agree with that. I mean, that doesn't, okay, so say we get a 50% that says, yes, we want you to hire, a company or a person like that, and 50% say no. We're the tiebreakers, we get to make the final decision, I'm not taking that away from us. But I think we ought to understand where the public is at any step in this process. Because it's not about us, it's about everybody who lives here, and we're just, 1, 2, 3, whatever, people in Gerhardt, so that's why
I see your point,
I'm.
Sharon. It's just, we cannot have a town hall every time we've got a decision to make. We can though, and we were given a directive during that town hall on Tuesday. People said they like the idea of having an overseer, and that's what I call it. And I want to just progress far enough that we reach out and get bids or proposals for these kind of situations, so we can go to the public and go, this is what we've got, this is what it's gonna cost, this is what they're going to do, and this is how I envision it going. But as far as contacting the public every time we've got a decision, that's just, I can't do that. I don't see it being a viable action. I mean, they have to trust us to do some good, and they have to be able to come to our meetings, and that's another thing we need to spend some time with the chief on. Chief Como, because he's got a way where everyone can vote from their phone and we can have instantaneous results. And I would like to discuss that a little bit, okay? And so instead of going too much farther into this, I'll set up another agenda of what we're gonna discuss. Chad, I hope everyone's on board. Just get a proposal from a company or several companies, a request for proposal. So we can go to the public at the next town hall and go, this is what they're gonna do, this is how much it's gonna cost, this is what we're hoping to do.
Can I say something?
Sure.
This basically is a consultant that we're hiring,
Right.
okay? We are not gonna reinvent the wheel.
I hope
The
not.
consultant we're gonna hire, if we agree on that, is a guy that's already been down this road. We're all novices. I mean, I've been in the construction business my entire life, worked on massive projects. I would not want to have to take this on.
Right, and
So you
and there's
get a
no
guy
reason any of us should have
Have
to.
to, you know, but we're not gonna do what the school district did.
Can you be more specific?
CSA. So, you know, I mean, basically, we're gonna hire a consultant that's already done this numerous times. He knows all the pitfalls, he knows the people to get a hold of. He's got a team that will streamline everything, and he's gonna give us the information, and that we can take it out to the public. And if you, Sharon, if you go out and you survey 50% of the constituents and everything like that, what they've got a bone against is that the last time we went up for a bond, the public was not informed. We spent $170,000 over 10 years trying to figure out a location for a fire station, and the public never knew, they were never informed as to where the money was going, or how much was being spent. And that's the reason why they're all upset.
Well, they were informed of the money being spent because we did make it known on several different occasions. It was the lack of engagement with the public that we failed at, that the council failed at. And I'm not saying we as this council, because it wasn't. But we did not engage the public, and that's one thing I am committed to do in this, is let them know where we are, how we're going about what we're directed to do, and what we're spending money on. Okay,
I agree with you.
thank you. So if we can we go to Chief Como and get just a little talking to about Copart?
Kahoot,
Kahoot.
close. I looked into it, and they have, if you pay for a year, you get, I think 20% off, don't quote me on that number, but what it was is $340 for a year. And then you're limited to 2,000 participants.
At a time or just over the whole year,
At any single time.
at any single time?
If you do the next step down, you're limited to 200 participants. I mean, there's either the free version was getting a couple of 200 or 2,000, so there's kind of two big jumps there. And then that lets you do polling, you can do polls, it's kind of like a voting, you can do quizzes, it's made for schools and trainings, they have school systems all the time, we've used it for training people in the fire department, like a test, you can do quizzes. Everybody logs in, and they see a screen and they vote, or answer questions, in a live format. I do not know how it works in like a setup delayed format, like let's say you have 2 weeks to gather information. I don't know how that would work. We've only used it in a live setting and it gives you instantaneous results.
Right, but if we went to a town hall, we could, if people were able to do what
Yeah.
it takes, is that a PC with a smartphone? Or is it just a smartphone with a split screen capability? Whatever that is.
Any device that can access the internet. So a laptop, a computer, a Mac, Android phone, an Apple phone, what have you, any device, because you can either download the app or just go to the website, kahoot.com, and then you would put in a quick code that would be unique to our room, our environment, our quiz. So only the people that we're engaging with gets that unique code, and then they could log in and deal with it.
Right. And so it limits the amount of voting for just one vote per person or one login?
Yeah,
So we're not gonna have,
well, I mean, if you have your mom, your brothers, you could have 5 people in a room, and it's per device,
right,
is what it is for there, but yeah, you put a question down and everybody gets to answer each question once.
right, okay, great.
Do the questions have to be asked and answered in real time, or can they be thought about and then gotten?
That's what I don't know. we've only used in real time. I don't know if you can do like a 2-week open for that. That would be something set up that we've done in the past, like a Google form. You send the link out and then everybody does. Which is a more Stone Age type tablet. Everybody just kind of votes and gets your.
Okay, great. So, are there any other questions for the chief, or the chief? Or Mark? I'm sorry, Mark, I can't call you that.
Director.
Director.
I don't want to be a chief, so.
No more questions for them?
I have a question, and this might not be the time or place, and I apologize if I'm in the wrong. Because I'm not talking about the consultant here. But Chief, come on. Last time when we went through this whole process, people were really upset about the money, and I understand that. But they were even almost more upset about the location. We still haven't found a location, is this correct?
No, ma'am.
So I get asked from the people, my constituents, if there's any possibility of placing the new safety building where it is local, where it is already. I mean, is that a possibility?
Well, sure, it's a possibility. There's a lot you have to figure out before you can just say something can happen in a single
Yeah,
place.
I understand.
But I don't see anything why you would have to write it off.
What does that mean?
Any huge red flag that says it absolutely cannot go here.
Okay, all right, because that's what people are asking me, and so I apologize if it was the wrong time or place, but that was it.
All right. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Peter.
one option that we might have is we could go out for an advisory vote. So if it, I mean, we're essentially, if we crafted a ballot question and it would be non-binding, but we could gauge community support in that manner. And if that happened during the regularly scheduled election, so either in May or November, then it would be no additional cost to the city. And I think you guys have identified many of the main points. We're not sure exactly what made voters vote no, whether it was the location or whether it was the expense or whether it was a combination thereof or other factors we don't know. But that might be one way to gauge how likely voters would vote in an election authorizing bonding. And that is an issue that is unique to us because only 50% of Gearhart residents are domiciled here. So there are a lot of people that might care very much about this issue, but they're not necessarily voting on it in the election. Whereas an advisory vote, we're gauging the likely voters. So that could be one option. And then the other piece is for the consultant, I just wanted to reiterate that once a question is on the ballot, then city funds can't be used for any sort of advocacy work. So the advocacy would need to come from the council or come from a separate political action committee. So a consultant could facilitate the discussion and gather all that information so that you as a council will be informed as to what had the highest likelihood of passing. But once that question is on the ballot to be voted upon, the bond authorization, all city funds would need to stop being used at that point.
So even if it's just an advisory vote, we would have to stop?
No, the advisory vote's non-binding, and so there aren't, that I don't know that we would have a facilitator in place for an advisory vote. I was merely mentioning that as an option because that might be a way to narrow down, and there could be multiple questions that are advisory in nature. And there's an AG opinion related to the Mount Hood Highway that actually established the ability for government to do advisory votes. So we could it's possible that you could narrow the scope of the issues that way and know that, okay, likely voters on the question prefer a downtown location versus another one, or likely voters would authorize X amount of money, but not Y amount of money, and that could help inform the scope of the project and the location.
Okay. I'll give you a call tomorrow. I think that's a great idea. I think if we got an advisory vote in the May election, that doesn't preclude us from getting another advisory vote after, or if we do get an overseer and having one in November, right?
Right, there could be multiple advisory votes. Again, it's just one tool that we could use in order to gauge community support. Because I certainly wouldn't want to bring something in front of voters that they don't want again.
Oh, obviously, that is not what we want either.
Right.
What are the costs entailed in an advisory vote? Is that the same as any other vote, anytime we put something on the ballot?
It would be no cost to the city, because if it's on the May or November of this year, if it's a special election, then we would have to pay for the costs.
Okay. Okay, and what's our deadline to get it on May? Do you do 90 days before?
I'd have to check the dates, but it will be coming up. It's coming up pretty soon. So if you want me to draft one or more and bring them to the city council, the next city council meeting would be the time to do it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
And May would be a good time to do it, if May or November. I wouldn't want to put it off till November, but we're gonna have a lot of people showing up to vote this year because there's a presidential election and all of that going on this year, so you'll have a lot more voters, have a lot more participation than we normally expect in an election.
so. Do any of you want to be on a question committee? And talk with Peter tomorrow? Okay, I think we're gonna do that. We can't make a decision at this meeting, but I believe we're going to go in that direction, and we'll need to have something for the next city council meeting, which is next week.
Right.
And I'll be in touch with my thoughts on some of the questions, and you can relay what you think are pertinent questions too.
Yeah, I think that in my mind, the location is a really important question.
Yes.
And, I think people I've had a lot of people tell me they liked the current location of the fire station. I didn't ask them, well, did you vote no or yes based on that? But they've just said, hey, I really like having the fire station downtown. So, there are elevation reasons why it might be at another location. But if people want it downtown and we're not giving it to them downtown, then, that might be the reason they're voting no.
Right, okay, we'll be in touch tomorrow.
All right.
Thank you. If you guys want to go home to your families, we're gonna talk trees now.
You have a great night.
Thank you very much for coming and staying and listening and participating. Thank you. And we are moving forward. Always forward.
Thank you. Have a good night, y'all.
Good night.
See you later, Mark.
All right. Anyone need a file break? Chad, what time is it?
We have 7:14 started.
7:14, so that's about 3 minutes slow and an hour.
And
Okay,
I don't think it's that simple to change it that way. It needs a radio signal.
all right. So you've got this tree discussion printout. We have something from Dana and something from Sharon. Do you want to go through this real quick? Not you, Chad. Sure, it's got 2 counselors and names on it, if that's all right with you. It's all right with you, Dana?
Yeah, I haven't seen it before, I just sat down here, and because we've been discussing other things, I haven't had a chance to go through this, so even though my name's on it, I can't say that this, whether it represents.
Someone's writing your name on something?
So what I did on this is I took some notes during the council work session and then I enlisted Justine's help with the minutes, and we talked about some of the things that were on as far as questions that were left and that we wanted to discuss. So what I put on this discussion was Councilor Dana wanted to add a definition of trees. Councilor Sharon, about 3/4 of the way down, requested a benefits of tree statement. Councilor Sharon also requested an alternatives measures to cutting trees statement. And an arborist versus tree cutter removers issue. And then the deleterious effects of tree cutting were some concerns that were had during the meeting. So what I did was take the opportunity to put some ideas for discussion in here. There were still some holes within the tree cutting ordinance, including whether or not 30 or 36, 38 inches in circumference was the right way to go.
So that would go under the tree definition.
Yeah, whatever we would define a tree, to change that. So I just put some things out there for discussion for you.
Sure.
Can I add to that? Can I add to that, Chair?
Yeah, this is your meeting.
Another question I had was, who should be making the decision about, whether a tree gets cut down or not in our city?
Are you talking about an individual tree or more than 5 trees?
Any.
Okay.
Anytime there's a decision that needs to be made, if we say they can cut down 5 trees, they can cut down 5 trees and nobody's, it's great to have the permit system so that we know what trees where are being cut down. Absolutely, so we can track all that, that's the whole. But if we say they can cut down 5 trees per year, then they don't have to ask permission, right? So nobody's making the decision on that.
They would just need a permit, and that permit. would be
But there are a
signed
lot
as
of,
long
right,
as parameters.
so there's a lot of instances where a person, has to make a decision about whether trees should come down or not, right?
Yeah, on a personal piece of property right now, if you wanted to cut down 5 trees, I would say you're welcome to do that, just make sure that they are trees. Some people invite me up to take a look at it, some people say that they'll handle it. Versus if we were to get more into the permitting process, the way it's written right now is somebody would come to me and say, I want to cut down these trees. I would say, well, you need to fill out a permit. And then as long as the permit made the parameters, I would sign off on that. But there's no provisions as to why you're cutting the tree down. There's no restrictions to cutting those 5 trees down. And that's the way the planning commission was kind of pushing it up to the city council for their determination. Now it's up to you folks to make any changes. you
Right,
want.
but we have public property issues as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, I was just using that as an example.
And I'm saying you, at this point, are the person that makes a decision about which trees can come down versus which trees can't come down. Again, a private property owner meets the criteria of the 5 trees coming down. It, it'd be good for you to look at that, absolutely, or whoever's making that decision, but they don't need your permission per se. Public property, whole different ballgame. So my question is, do we have one person making the decision about what trees come down on public property, or do we have a group of people that are making decisions about what trees come down on public property? That's all I'm asking.
Well, personally, I would like to see it that even on private property, if you've got a heritage, 5 heritage trees and you want to cut them down and you're telling me it's perfectly all right just to get a permit, I'm against that. These heritage trees have been here for 250 years. they're an icon of Gerhardt. I mean, when you drive in, you see those trees and I would rather see them protected than allowed to be cut willy-nilly. They have a potential of losing a limb. Well, you know, if you use that kind of thinking, any tree can be cut down because it has the potential of losing a limb. And what I would like to at least see is a 3-person committee that by majority gives the okay for that kind of work.
And what criteria do the 3 people have? What's their background?
Well, that's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Who's gonna be making the decision?
well, it'll be
Is it
a
just gonna be
3-person
three
panel.
laymen, or is it gonna be some professionals that are making the determination?
Good question. I guess we need to talk about that. They could have a arborist on the group. If we could get someone who volunteered their time instead of that charging us.
So the other aspect of that, what I'm hearing you say, Carrie, is the older, larger trees and how can we protect them? So maybe under our tree definition, you know, we need to spell out between X size and X size, have at it, more or less. But over X size, let's think about it or look at it or however you want to put it. I wonder if we should put that under the tree definition.
I think that'd be a good place for it.
So you're adding criteria that would allow somebody to. That would allow, right now, as this is written, it would force Chad to be the bad guy and say, no, you can't cut down that tree. And I think that I share the same concern with you, that I think that sets Chad up to
Yes.
do too much and to be too responsible and, for something like this, and I don't like that feeling at all. And I still think, like, even with this definition that you gave me, I pointed out to you, I was sitting in your office and I pointed out this basic little bush out here that under the old criteria, would be a tree under the, you know, if you're gonna take strictly a measurement. So, I mean, I think you could define it and break it down to, you know, whether you're defining the largest branch or the trunk or whatever. But I think that still needs to be clarified. But the other thing is, something that Peter brought up, if I'm understanding Peter correctly, we need to be very careful about straying from creating new things under our comprehensive plan that are under our comprehensive plan. Is that correct, Peter?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. One is that, you know, what the planning commission was tasked with doing is like clarifying our current ordinance, because there were parts of it that were either ambiguous or diameter versus circumference. You know, someone might be trying to do the right thing and just was confused. So that's what they did. If we're going to talk about having a tree committee, if we're going to categorize different rules for different trees to spend depending on, so if we're talking about a cap, so if there's a minimum circumference of X, and if it's under that, it's not a tree, that's easy to understand. And then there's a circumference from that number, whatever it is, 34, 38, whatever you land on, because it's your choice, to some greater number. And then beyond that, special process for those trees, we would need to make sure that the public understood that, because that's something that would be a pretty radical deviation from how this process started, which was to clarify our ordinance. Then as far as our comp plan, if we're adding language to goal 5, which is the environmental goal, then yeah, we would probably want to run that past DLCD staff. Because if it's a, if it's a substantial change to our comprehensive plan, then that would have to be acknowledged by the state.
Can you clarify what you mean by adding language? Are you talking about if we're now deciding that we're gonna protect the older trees or something like that that wasn't?
Well, I think if you're talking about, and I don't know where this conversation is necessarily going to go, and that's part of the reason I think I recommended a work session to help determine the scope of where we want to go. If we're talking about some sort of urban forestry program or urban canopy program or something like that, I would want to look at our existing goal 5, the elements of our comprehensive plan, and see if we would need to change those, or if we could change it via code. So, because we have language in our code, and we had some of that discussion last time about like the estuary and how why that wasn't defined versus the creek, which was. I'd want to look at our goal 5 comp plan language and see how much what we need to do, if anything. And a lot of that's going to depend on the scope of the changes that you guys decide you want.
In the planning commission looked at this and they debated and they said, well, if it's a tree permitting process that you want, then let's give them that with the same ordinance that we have, allow people to cut 5 trees, make sure that they get a permit first, and that's pretty well as simple as they want. If we were going to go into a situation where, and this is scope, like what Peter was talking about, that the city wants to restrict even cutting of those 5 trees depending on its heritage designation and other well-defined criteria on whether or not they should. And this is going to take us a little bit longer to kind of come up with that, but it's entirely possible. We would have to come up with the committee, the criteria, the procedure for limiting the ability for people to cut trees on their property. And if that's the direction you want to head, it's a little different animal than what we have here.
And that would entail a hearing too, right, Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably entail multiple hearings, because if we're telling people that they can't cut a tree, I mean, right now they can cut 5 and the community and more if they're developing the site. And the community, I think, is pretty accepting of that. If we're going to create a category of trees that they can't cut, or they have to get the permission, whether it's from the planning commission or the city councilor or a tree committee or whomever, that impacts people's property rights in a different way. And then the other thing, and again, I'm not suggesting that one approach is better or not at all. Just trying to flag some legal issues for you. Portland just went through a pretty bad storm where some big trees came down, and some of those trees were trees where the people sought a tree cutting permit from the city and were denied it. And I don't know from a liability standpoint how that's going to shake out. Cities usually have pretty broad sovereign immunity, and so it's difficult to sue them, depending on what it is. In this case, where someone affirmatively sought something, claiming it created a danger, the city denied it, and then it in fact did what the people believed it would do, which was smash into their houses. That, from a liability standpoint, the city could potentially have some exposure. And so that's because that just happened last week, and also happened to a friend of mine who had 4 trees hit their house. It's just been top of mind since that storm. So I think that's the other thing, as far as if an arborist is recommending that a tree gets cut down and our tree committee, and I'm not saying we would have one, or whoever the decision-making body is, if they're going to deny that and then the tree comes down, that could potentially create some liability for the city. So we need to be careful and also just make sure that these are clear and objective standards that everybody understands and that they can follow to help them not get into trouble and to help us stay out of trouble too.
Yeah, we can't lose sight of the fact that we are a city where we have septic systems. And so if you look at my property or anybody's property around here, once you have the part of your real estate that's occupied by homes, and if you don't have to get a building permit, which would allow you to cut down a tree to put in a shed of a certain size. But you can't put a shed of a certain size over your septic system, so there's very limited areas on your property where you might be able to put that. And if you are now going to say, if I want to put a shed on my property and the only place I can put it is where there happens to be a tree, and under the old rules, I could cut down that tree. Now you're saying there are new rules and they were presented to us, and the way that you read the introduction into that, it was, you gotta get a permit, but it's just so we can count and make sure that you're not going over 5 trees. But then during our discussion, it came up, oh no, there might be some expectation that he actually says, no, you're not gonna be able to cut down a tree, even if it's less than 5 trees or meets the old criteria. That's gonna be a problem for me. If I want to build a shed, the only place I can build it is a tree, and you're going to tell me that I can't, it's gonna diminish my property value, and we're gonna have a problem. So I think we need to keep that in mind. I think that, getting back to what Sharon said, I think we're making a decision that, you know, I think it's easy to say we wanna protect trees and everything, but if we're going to do that, then we need the public input and we need the public interaction, just like we've talked about on everything else today. That would be a big change for us to just impose on people without getting some public input on that.
Okay.
Chad, how many tree removal permits or applications do you get in a year?
We don't have a tree removal process. The only ones that I get are, on the beach dunes, and I haven't received one of those in quite some time.
So you haven't had anybody who's building and wants 5 trees gone from their property, that you haven't gotten any of those?
Not in the permit process because we don't have one, but
Right.
I have a lot of conversations. It's kind of a famous saying of mine when I'm leaving the office is I'm gonna go look at a tree. To the ladies that are up front, they kind of roll their eyes at me.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of tree conversations that happen. I foresaw the tree permitting process that we had, that's been started here as being a good one to get that information. And I saw that as manageable.
Mhm.
But if we go into something that's a little bit more entailed and is going to be going through a deliberative process with a committee, whether that be a planning commission or another committee. And then there's timing for that. Yeah, it's gonna add a lot of work, but we don't know what that is until the council decides how much restriction, if any, you want to put on property owners.
So wouldn't this be under the venue of the code enforcement officer?
Sure, she does help with that.
And this is kind of 2 cents. Somebody putting in an application to remove 5 trees, I would like someone to go out there and look at it before it. Just because.
Many times we do, but there are some people that know the rules, they don't want to ask the permission. They don't have to ask the permission, they'll go for it. But we have a lot of tree conversations in town.
All right.
So just to be clear, you probably know this, Rita, if you've got a building footprint, for instance, at the Ridge Path and D, the house went in there. Approximately 13 trees were cut down for that house to go in there. And they have every right to do that at this point in time with the city's rules.
Yeah.
They don't have to design around it, they don't have to keep X number of trees, right?
Correct, and I have heard some conversations about, well, we should be involved in that. I've heard conversations about this, I'm not saying we should. But the conversations are like, well, if somebody comes to us with a building plan, maybe they should go through a review process to see how they can reconfigure their building plan to save as many trees as possible. You can imagine all the steps that would be involved in that, but, that's a possibility.
But you know, if we allow that sort of thing to happen, then we're just gonna look like Seaside, which has hardly any trees. I mean, it's got,
She said it didn't have many trees to begin with.
well, it's got less now, it's just, yeah, and it's just like trees are so important to Gerhart. I think we should be out there checking every single one they wanna cut down. So that's just my 2 cents. Oh, I know I have another cent out there. Isn't this under the whole thing should be handled by the planning commission?
They did, and they decided to give this
To us,
scenario as it is.
Kick the football to us.
And then, so it's your football, you can push it back to the city council or the planning commission with some specifics to say, hey, we want you to consider these things if you like. Or you can take it on yourselves and move and continue to move it forward, but they were, yeah, I can't speak for them.
I was on the planning commission when we first brought this up to them, and my experience was with the planning commission. There was a number of people who didn't even want to have to discuss this.
and that's the thing, and we've discussed this before at the council, they don't have that much to do. And so I just say push it back and have our code enforcement officer out there and let's go.
Okay, well, we'll write up something and be a little more specific and during council next week, we can make a motion by consensus to move it back to the planning commission and delegate what we want them to work out for us.
With a little direction to say that you want it more restrictive, these kind of things considered, then they can decide whether or not they pick it up.
And we can get a tree ordinance without going to the heritage trees, that can be a separate issue. That way, we're not going into public meetings, which obviously would be at least 3 months down the road. And we can get something serious with that. Is that good with everybody?
Yay.
Yeah, there's a lot more discussion to be had there, but yeah.
Anyone else got anything to say about trees?
I like trees.
Everybody likes trees, but they also like to value their property, and we're making
Yeah.
rules that are gonna
Right.
value their property, have an obligation to open it up to have,
Right,
let them have a say.
but trees and mature foliage increase property values 3.5% to 15%.
Well, that is your opinion, and there's a
No, I
lot
looked it up.
well,
My opinion.
well, we can argue about that, we could debate that, but I'm not going to do it tonight.
Okay, well, do that if you want. I am going to call this meeting adjourned because we are past the hour-long work session timeline, aren't we?
7:38, sir.
So.
Thank you.
See everyone next week.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye, guys.
We'll talk tomorrow, Peter, if you can
All
get
right.
the time.
Shoot me an email and we'll get a time. I've got some
Okay,
meetings in the
thank you.
morning, but my early afternoon's pretty good.
All right, sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Now,